Good evening. The Central Organization of Trade Unions, COTU, has sued the government over the 16% value-added tax on petroleum products. This comes as activist Okiya Omtata files a case to stop the new VAT on petroleum products. Also tonight, matatu operators in parts of the country are staging a protest over this tax, a tax that has singularly received overwhelming objection. My colleague Sophia Wanuna spoke to David Ndii yesterday evening on what are the implications of this particular tax and, of course, the state of the economy currently. Let's take a look at bits of that conversation last night on Checkpoint.
Once you get yourself into debt distress, there is no silver bullet. Okay, there's no technical fix. There's no technical fix. Okay? So the idea that you're just gonna go out and catch some money and then plug the hole, it's a huge sort of structural imbalance.
Is it as hopeless as economist David Ndii puts it? Is there a way out of this crisis? We will be dissecting this on the big story tonight. I will be having a conversation with Moses Lesonet. He's the Member of Parliament for Eldama Ravine constituency, and he will be appearing in his capacity as the Vice Chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee in the National Assembly. We'll also have Maurice Odwor, who's a Senior Investments Manager of Citon Investments, appearing in his capacity as an economist. And from our city centre studios, we will be joined by Okiya Omtata, a reformist and human rights activist who just a few hours ago filed a case in court seeking to stop the 16% VAT on petroleum products. Once again, good evening. My name is Akisa Wandera, and this is a big story. Let's begin with some reactions from a cross-section of members of Parliament on this value-added tax on petroleum products.
For now, Kenyans have no option but to continue digging deeper into their pockets until that bill leaves Parliament to the President's table, when he will decide either to sign it into law or send it back to Parliament with a memorandum. Chris Dairo, KTN News at Parliament Buildings.
Since this law is in force from 1st September, I think the hands of the Cabinet Secretary, in my view, is tied, and indeed the hands of even the President, unless now he assents to this bill, which has the amendment proposed by June. I doubt whether the President will reject this amendment, given the concern that Kenyans have expressed. But the President may have a problem with any provision in that law and may require Parliament's attention. I think that is the time that we can recall Parliament, because we can't wait until Parliament reconvenes to make communication from the President. At the moment, it may be premature to recall Parliament, because what will when you recall Parliament to deal with a specific issue. We will, yes, talk about the fuel prices and the effect on the economy, but it will just remain talk. The most important thing that we need to do is to have the law amended so that we remove the VAT on fuel products completely. This is a law that was not in place up to 2013. They are very sure that this evening they will complete the consultations, and the indication is that probably tomorrow, latest Wednesday, the bill should be at State House for assent by the President. It is we hope that immediately the President comes back, given the pressure that is building in the country, I'm sure he will see it fit to assent to it immediately.
I think for the President, he needs to well advise, because from where I start, I think it's counterproductive, because what is going to happen, we will lose some money, some quite substantial amount of money through the 16% revenue on fuel. But later we will lose so much money because so much business will close down in this country. The President needs to admit that we are facing a crisis as a country. Because if we continue denying it to Kenyans that we don't have a crisis of money, we don't have a money crunch, we will continue punishing Kenyans. So we need to address that. And also as a country, we need to stop accruing more debt, because we have so much debt as a country right now. And when I hear the President going to America and China and other countries to get debt to finance this big four thing, which I'm not against, I think we are getting it wrong. What is ailing this country is, one, lack of our opposition, official opposition. I think when we had this handshake thing, and I saw Kenyans celebrating, I became a very worried man, because how do you celebrate when when those people who are supposed to check the government are telling you now we are also in government? How can we have everybody in government?
Every Kenyan owes the foreign debt over 100,000, every Kenyan. If you go by 5 trillion, with about 42, 43 million Kenyans, it is above 100,000 per Kenyan. We are in a crisis as a country. Revenue resources that we generate at the moment cannot sustain even the wage bill. I mean the money that goes for the salaries, we can't sustain the wage bill. We can't sustain the recurrent expenditure. We can't do any development. We are facing a scenario where we have to get resources to sort out the issues that we are facing. And it is not a solution to tax Kenyans. I think what we should do is to go back to where the money went. If we borrowed 5 trillion and almost 1 trillion out of it was stolen, who took the money?
We've seen what other countries have suffered in the hands of Chinese government. Sri Lanka, as we speak, their port is taken. Pakistan, they are going the same way. They have sought the intervention of the IMF. Are we likely to go the same route of the Sri Lanka? Why are we not so much keen in closing the loopholes of corruption? Because that's where we are here. We are trying to raise money by burdening the Kenyan mwananchi. There is no any nation on earth that develops by taxing its citizens.
As the Vice Chair of the Implementation Committee, we are meeting tomorrow as a committee to decide on the way forward as a committee, because we are a committee that is allowed by the standing orders to follow up on all the resolutions that are made by the House and propose sanctions against any cabinet secretary who goes against the resolutions of the House.
We also have a Kamkunji tomorrow where 150 members of parliament have confirmed attendance so that we deliberate on this issue. We are at the moment on recess, but we have to see a way forward so that we give a solution to these problems that are facing, that Kenyans are facing.
The strategy, if the government needs to raise more money, it needs to look at a tax that affects the rich, not the poor. Mm-hmm. And therefore, as members of parliament, we are here and we have come, although we are in recess, we are looking at ways in which we are going to bring down the fuel prices. Okay.
A section of members of parliament there reacting to the latest developments, of course, on the taxing of petroleum products by 16%. And of course, some of them proposing protests. We have seen proposals on the impeachment of Treasury Cabinet Secretary, and as well as members of parliament like Nandi Hills Member of Parliament Alfred Keter seeking for a Kamkunji for members of parliament to chart the way forward on this. We will be joined by one MP, Moses Lesonet, a Member of Parliament for Eldama Ravine, in a short while. He's also the Vice Chairperson of the Budget and Appropriations Committee. We will be seeking to find out, what are some of the legislations that we should be seeing cushioning Kenyans from the current situation they find themselves in. And of course, an economist, Maurice Odwor, who will be breaking down the numbers for us and telling us what will be the eventual ripple effect of this action from the 1st of September, which was just about a few days ago. But first, let's speak to activist and reformist Okiya Omtata, who now joins us live from our city center studio. Just a few hours ago, he filed a case in court seeking to suspend the taxing of petroleum products by 16%. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us here tonight on The Big Story. Obviously, by the fact that you filed a case in court, it means you're quite unhappy with this latest development. What are you seeking from the courts?
Well, basically, I'm seeking, I have two sets of prayers. I have short-term prayers where I'm seeking for the court to suspend the implementation of the VAT Act, the 16% VAT on petroleum products. And I'm also looking for, in the final prayers, I'm asking for the court to quash the section of the VAT Act which imposes VAT on petroleum products. So I've got those two prayers which I'm making to the court, the interim prayers and the final prayers. And my grounds are basically that the imposition of VAT on petroleum products is one, unreasonable, which basically violates Article 47 of the Constitution, which requires administrative action to be reasonable. I'm also saying that there's a violation of the right to property, and the VAT Act, which imposes this tax, does not meet the threshold of limiting the enjoyment of rights which is set in the Constitution. So yes. I'm saying that it's really, the bill itself is unconstitutional. I'm also asking the court to make a determination on where Parliament has made its will very, very clear. Can we rely on a technicality of signing a law, given the grave nature of the impact of VAT on the economy, and proceed to apply it in defiance of Parliament? So those are among the issues I want the court to deliberate upon and determine. And I'm also pointing out that it's really a matter of national security, because if you look at Article 238 of the Constitution, it talks of national security as the protection, among other things, the protections of Kenyans, their property, their rights and freedoms and stuff like that. So if the IMF is coming in here to dictate how to violate our rights to property, our rights to fair administrative action, and those kind of rights by imposing taxes that are really counterproductive to our well-being, then the IMF is threatening, is a threat to national security, and it should be declared as such a threat. So those are the things among the issues I'm raising in my petition. And I was unable to, there was a hitch in the register whereby they claimed they did not have receipts, so I kept waiting for a long time, and by the time I got a receipt, it was past the time of filing, of taking the files to the judge. So my file will go to the judge tomorrow morning, and that's when we shall be able to see what kind of directions the judge gives.
Back to what you've just said about IMF being declared as national insecurity, so to speak. I mean, we find ourselves as a country where we are now because of our huge appetite for borrowing. Some would argue that this is a consequent effect of how much Kenya has borrowed, that the IMF has had to come in and ensure that Kenya shows goodwill, that it will be able to sustain the kind of loans that they are taking.
Well, I understand that the IMF is usually a last resort for governments that have failed to manage the economy well. And in fact, the question of going to the IMF after we finished with Mzee Kibaki, who had really set us on a road to a takeoff, is a big, big indictment of the Jubilee government. And my desire to have this thing taken as a national security issue is to address these issues of the massive borrowing, reckless borrowing, and using that money in a reckless manner, that we don't seem to have any regard for what we are doing to ourselves, so that we are posing it's a national threat that we are posing to ourselves. And the country cannot continue under this kind of regime of our appetite for foreign debt. And when you come to the issue of imposing the VAT as a way for paying for those debts, or balancing the budget, it's an official record that 30% of our national budget, which is about 500 billion shillings, if we take the issue of if we take into account the size of the current budget,
okay,
you find that the 75 billion that is going to be raised by imposition of VAT is really nothing if we can just tighten up the budget, clean it up, and we shed out this padding that's in that budget that inflates it to a point whereby we are basically committing suicide.
Okay. I want us to now engage Maurice Odwor. He's a senior investments manager at Certain Investments, appearing tonight as an economist. Maurice, thank you for joining us here on the program tonight. I mean, just break it down for our viewers tonight. When we heard of the implementation of this particular bill, of course, it's immediately translated to transport, but there's a huger burden when it comes to manufacturers, going down to the fuel that is used in households in terms of kerosene for cooking. I mean, what are the long-term effects of the implementation of this bill?
First of all, just to put in context this, the VAT Act that was supposed to impose 15% on the petroleum products was a law that was passed in 2013, and it's supposed to be was suspended for 3 years. It's supposed to be effected in the year 2016. Again, when it reached 2016, the MPs again postponed it for another 2 years to 2018. And now where we are in 2018, there's sort of like there's a technical hitch in terms of between the executive and so the legislature. The MPs already passed the bill that this law is supposed to be suspended again for another 2 years. But on the other side, the CS for Treasury is saying that now for him he will go ahead and start executing, and also we've seen also the revision in terms of the revision in price in terms of petroleum products. What this means, and if you look at all sectors and all segments of the economy are usually affected by the transport cost, and this one is likely going to come into effect. We're likely to see inflation going up, the cost of living going up, and this VAT Act is also one of the conditionalities that was put by IMF for the Kenya to access the standby credit facilities. So the full effect of this, we are going to see cost of living going up, which will likely affect Kenya, and this one will also going to affect some of the price of some of the most essential commodity goods.
I want us to take a quick break. When we get back, we'll be breaking it down. What does this? We say it will translate to a huge cost of living. Tighten up our budget. We'll be looking at what really should we be doing to ensure that Kenya doesn't find itself in situations like this now. Let's take a quick break. This is the big story. Don't go too far.